Can you be real? Can you be natural in an unnatural environment? Number 2, the mask has been pulled away from COVID, and I'm not talking about face masks. Number 3, the tyranny of a microscopic minority. It's the Will Cain Podcast on Fox News Podcast. I hope you will download, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your audio entertainment. Apple, Spotify, or of course, on Fox News Podcast. I have my 3 big stories of the week, of the day, maybe of the year, for you right here this morning. Let's start with number 1. The biggest story of the day isn't the biggest story in the nation. It's not the biggest story for you, but it is the biggest story for me this week. Starting tonight, May 17th, Monday through Friday, I will be hosting Fox News Primetime, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Pacific Time, all week long. And man, I'm excited. But I'm also nervous. I don't know. I don't know if this is a tryout. I don't know if I'm filling in. I don't know anything except that I want to do me. I want to be real. I want to be authentic. I know everyone says that, but truly, it's the only real currency, not just in this business, but in this world. You know, I've told you before, my wife says there are various filters that people see the world through. You know, when I was in 7th or 8th grade, I think probably real versus fake was how I explained people's behavior. Oh, she's fake. Oh, he's not real. And you would judge people based upon those 2 polar opposite outcomes. As I grew into my 20s and 30s, I think I started to see people through the lens of confidence or insecurity. I explained their behavior as either coming from a place of insecurity or a place of security, of confidence. And I'm not saying I was wrong. I think all those things contribute. I definitely have gravitated now into my 40s into seeing people through the lens of strong or weak. And I don't mean to be overly judgmental. I'm trying to explain phenomena that I see not just in individuals, but in our society at large. And when I see, for example, corporate CEOs bend, not for greed, not for their bottom line, but bend to job security, bend to fear, I start to explain the majority of human behavior either through a place of spinelessness or backbone, strength or weakness. But I might just circle back to the way I was when I was in 7th or 8th grade, through the lens of real or fake. It's ultimately really the base level of what we ask of each other. What can we do with one another if we can't trust that we're being authentic? It's base level. I mean that. It's necessary but not sufficient. So take my job, for example. When I stand in front of a microphone, when I stand in front of a camera and I talk to you, I think the bare minimum I can satisfy, the bare minimum you can ask, that you have to ask, is Will being real? Is he truthful? Is he giving it to me, maybe not in a way that I agree with, or maybe not even in a way that I enjoy, but in a way that I can trust is at the very least real? You know, I say it's base level because if you satisfy that low bar of being authentic, then comes the question, are you authentically unlikable? You know, or are you authentically a turnoff? Do I authentically disagree with everything you stand for in this world and therefore I don't want to be around you? Authenticity doesn't guarantee you anything, but without it, you'll only be faking likability. You'll only be faking agreement. And that has an expiration date. That's got a timestamp on it. I don't think any actor, no matter how well feted, can really fake it forever. In fact, let's talk about that a little bit later here in the Will Cain Podcast today. So my goal with you this week, as I fill in at 7 p.m., is to be real. And I've received good advice going into the week. In an effort to be real, let's just pull the curtain back for just a moment. Let's just go into this. I told you, I don't know. I don't know if this is a tryout. I don't know if I'm just filling in for a week. And people have told me, Will, do the Will Cain Show. And I know that's right. I know that's true. I know that's good advice. But easier said than done, because can you be real? Can you be natural in an incredibly unnatural environment? Here, I'm going to tell you what it was like the very first time I ever went on national television. Perhaps ironically, or in a twist of fate, which I do not believe in. I believe in free will. I don't believe in destiny. But maybe if you're a believer that your path is already charted, this can help with a little bit of supporting evidence. My first appearance on national television was on Fox and Friends. And so I sit down, and in retrospect, I don't remember if it was weekend or weekday. I don't remember if it was Steve Doocy and Brian Kilmeade or Clayton Morris. I just remember sitting into that seat, and it felt a little bit like strapping in to a space shuttle. I mean, you sit down, there's bright glaring lights right on you. I'm in the studio, probably 20 yards away from the host, but instead of being on the couch, I'm staring into a camera, probably because the couch is too crowded. Who knows why I had to speak into a camera? They're putting a mic on you. There's people rushing all around, fluffing your hair, doing whatever they do. It's a buzz of activity, all of it right up to a countdown with someone that I now know has the job title of a floor manager going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then everything goes dead silent and you're on. And the whole thing is just this swirling soup, a stew, better said, of an unnatural environment. And then boom, you need to be conversational and natural. Now look, man, I'm not trying to make TV look harder than it is or make it sound like wielding a jackhammer on city sidewalks for 10 hours a day. I know what I do for a living, and I know how taxing it is. And at this point, I know how many of us out there are actually creating content straight into our cameras. So I know I'm not telling you that I'm literally flying a space shuttle. But what I'm telling you is there's just so many external stimuli that take you out of being natural. And it's true in really, I think, any form of media. That's one of the things I loved about my opportunity to do radio at ESPN. I always wanted to do radio, partially because it stripped away so many of those stimuli. I mean, it was me, it was a microphone, it had a visual component on ESPN News, but I don't know, you never really thought about that, not at least at first. There's callers, there's sound, there's Nuno, there's Bubba, there's Cerruti, there's people around and there's things going on. And even then, I will tell you, I don't know how many months it was before the pressure sort of came down and I became me. I became real. It took a minute. And I mean that in terms of probably months. Same thing once again. Even though I've done television and radio for more than a decade now, same thing once again when I strapped into the spaceship of Fox and Friends this past summer. A whole new set of stimuli, a whole new pace, cadence. I went from 3 hours solo, tons of elbow room, to talking really honestly in 30-second increments with Pete Hegseth and Jedediah Bila. It was a whole new speed. And in that, you got to find you. Hey, you want to be real? This right here, me talking to you directly. This is new, and it's taken me a minute to get back to being Will Cain. Because even when I was doing radio, I did have Nuno and Bubba and Mike A. and Pat, my boys. And I had you. I loved you. I love you. I needed you. What I mean by that is the callers. I used to say to Nuno, if you don't punch me in the nose in the first 15 seconds of this 3-hour show, you haven't done your job. And what I mean by that is find me a caller, find me a piece of sound, or you, Kim Jong-Nuno, my supreme leader of the Will Cain Show, have to jump in and tell me where I'm wrong. Have to give me my reality check. I take what I say seriously. I do not take myself seriously. So the job was to punch me in the nose. I got to be rocked, man, because then, boom, I'm back. I'm being real. I'm me. And here I am with you on this podcast, and all of that's gone. Now I have no stimuli. Now I'm literally in a room as we speak right now by myself on the 15th floor of Fox News buildings on 6th Avenue in New York City. And I got to, in that environment, be real. And I'll get there. You can get there. Anyone can get there eventually. It's a matter of when. It's like being a guest in someone's house. And by the way, when you slip into someone else's show, when you fill in, wow, man, that's even weirder. When I jumped in with Ryan Russillo or filled in for Russillo, or when I hosted Martha McCallum's show at 7 p.m. this past winter break, Christmas break. Now that's super weird because you got to say, let me be real, let me throw my feet up on the coffee table in someone else's house because you are a guest. That's a machine, you didn't create it. So how do you own it? And there are ridiculously talented people. And when I say talent, it's a weird thing, but like take Charles Barkley. Barkley is at the top of the mountain of broadcasting. He's the best of the best in my estimation. There are others that are up there. I think Tucker is incredibly talented in different ways. But what Barkley's talent is, he's always Barkley. It does not matter whose house he's in. If Charles Barkley came over to a dinner party at your house, and I don't even care if it was a big dinner party with 50 people, you would feel like a guest. It would feel like Charles's house. He would come in wearing your clothes, throwing his feet up on your coffee table, eating your food. And you'd be like, hey, Charles, do you mind if I use the restroom? And he'd tell you where the powder room is. He's that confident in who he is, man. He is authentic all the time. And so to do it in somebody else's house is just a whole nother level of authenticity. And I'd like to think that's what I bring. I think ultimately because I recognize, hey, you may or you may not like me. Hey, you're definitely going to disagree with some of what I have to say. Or, hey, look, I know who I am. I'm too tall, too skinny, too adamant, sometimes preachy. Sometimes for some people a turn off, some others a turn on. I know who I am and I know that I'll get to being real. I know that because I have to. I don't have a good way of hiding it. I'm not a good actor. I know I'll get there at some point. The question will be, will I get there in a week? Or better yet, in a day? Will I get there by Monday night? Will I get there by Tuesday? Will I make somebody else's home my own? Will I satisfy that low bar of being real? I love sports. You know that. The analogy in sports for any rookie player, any linebacker, any defensive lineman, any safety, when do you stop thinking? You can see rookie players, talented, incredibly, first-round draft picks, thinking too much. The question is when do they start reacting, just playing with their instincts? That's when that rookie player is real. Can I jump into that 7 p.m. primetime show, have my voice go out and go, roll with it, baby? I hope so. I hope you'll come along for the ride. I hope you'll find out, hey, can Will be natural in an unnatural environment in a week's time? I will tell you this. I promise you one thing, as you always know, I will tell you the truth as I see it. That part will be 100% real. See you at 7.
Listen and be part of the conversation with me, Guy Benson, talking about the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest newsmakers around. Listen live on the Fox News app or get the free podcast at GuyBensonShow.com.
Story number 2. The mask is off of COVID, and I'm not talking about face masks. Last week, the CDC quickly, unexpectedly, in a complete about-face, lifted the face mask guidelines. And let's be sure to underline the fact that they were guidelines. They weren't mandates. They sure as fire weren't laws. They were guidelines to wear masks indoors and outdoors. The CDC lifted their guidance not just for you to remove your mask outdoors, but inside as well. And in the process, in that about face of just a few weeks' time, because if you'll remember, 2 weeks before that, CDC Director Rochelle Walensky was saying, mask your children at summer camp. And just a couple of days before that, they were talking about the coming impending doom of a COVID spike. And then, out of nowhere, the CDC guidelines on mask wearing was gone. Poof. In the process, revealing the guidelines were never science. Nothing magically changed in that time frame. No scientific data came back. No magical threshold of vaccination levels was crossed. What it revealed was this was guidance guided by something other than science. I think for those in power, you and I both know it was about politics. It was about control. But what I find fascinating is what it did to those who used COVID and used the mask as something else, as a signal, as a team armband, a team hat, if you will. Those that use the mask as a signal, a weight of virtue that they are better than you. We've talked about that here on the Will Cain podcast on numerous occasions, but you no longer need me to tell you about it because so many, and let's be real, of those on the left were left out in the cold without their fake science, that quote-unquote science-based guidelines to back them up anymore. Let's go through just two prime examples and take them at their own word. David Hogg, who's a survivor of the Parkland shooting tragedy, who's gone on to be a far-left political activist, tweeted in the wake of the CDC guidelines the following: I feel the need to continue wearing my mask outside even though I'm fully vaccinated because the inconvenience of having to wear a mask is more than worth it to have people not think I'm a conservative. That is a direct quote from a tweet from David Hogg. He was and will continue to wear his mask as a signal. In this case, something as shallow as his political affiliation. Robbie Suave of Reason Magazine has said it. I've borrowed it, so I want to give him full credit. He said the mask has turned into Team Blue's MAGA hat. And that's clearly true. But it's even deeper. I'm telling you, it's become, for so many, not a neurosis, because a neurosis implies a real fear of COVID. A neurosis means you've internalized sitting around in your apartment for 14, 15 months, afraid of what floats in the air outside. Neurosis implies that there is a true fear-based reason the mask remains over your nose and mouth. And look, there are some out there that truly are fearful. And they are, at this point, I think, paranoid. But there are others who, again, were using this for something else. Not control, not power like the politicians, not fear like those that have fallen into paranoia, but as part of their identity. An identity that is based upon supremacy, being better than you. I want you to listen to what I think is one of the most revealing and stunning pieces of audio from this past week. This is from MSNBC's Rachel Maddow and what this new mask guidance is going to do to her.
I will just tell you at a personal level, I'm sorry for speaking of all that in such personal terms with Dr. Walensky, but when I was talking to people today about this new guidance and what to ask her, everybody had very personal feelings about it, and I realized I did too, and all these questions. Part of it is that I feel like I'm going to have to rewire myself so that when I see somebody out in the world who's not wearing a mask, I don't instantly think you are a threat, or you are selfish, or you are a COVID denier, and you definitely haven't been vaccinated. I mean, we're going to have to rewire the way that we look at each other, because the CDC's guidance, which she just told me, we are sure, is that if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask except in very specific circumstances. And so that means as we change that as a country, we are going to look at each other differently and have to unwire our preconceptions about what a mask or a lack of a mask means.
Can you believe that sound? Can you believe her admission? It's not just that she has to rewire her identity, but it's the reveal of how Rachel Maddow walks down the street judging strangers. And that judgment is core to her identity. And look, call me partisan if you want, and you're always free to tweet me at Will Cain or on Instagram, @WillCain, and tell me you're totally being partisan, Will. But that supremacy as part of their identity is becoming part, and I'm afraid always has been part, of the left's ideology. Here's what I think. Let's take this out of partisan politics for a minute. I think that at our very base level, human beings have some very bad instincts. I think that we are inherently somewhat tribalistic. We gravitate to people who look like us, think like us, behave like us. That tribalism throughout human history has forced us into racial tribes. It has forced us into gender tribes, political tribes, religious tribes, geographic tribes. We inherently find safety in numbers, and we find safety in like-minded, similar, cultural, familiar tribes. Civilization is the process of overcoming that tribalization. That's when you look around at the United States of America and say, look what we have done. We have largely, and I would suggest More than any civilization on the face of the earth, set aside those base level tribes. Instead, we rallied around a different tribe, a tribe based upon an idea, one that enshrined Western values of individualism, of freedom, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta, ideas that would grant each other as individuals real respect and value. These are values that did derive from a Judeo-Christian ethic, that man has inherent value, man was made in God's image, and man should be respected. Civilization is what moves us along from those base level instincts. I would also suggest that at our base level, we inherently want to find hierarchies. We want to be supreme. We want to find power over other individuals. Look at it this way. One of the best tests, I believe, that you can use to see how someone views themselves and how they view hierarchy and how we lust for power is go to a restaurant. Sit down with someone, maybe it's an acquaintance, a new couple that you met in a new town you've moved to, and see how that person treats the wait staff. I know you've seen it. I've seen it as well. That moment where you think your friend is one person, and the minute they treat the waiter or waitress with so much disrespect over their drink order, or how quickly the bread arrives at the table, or their unwillingness to even make eye contact, or just the general disrespectful dismissiveness reveals they're someone else. Because in many people's lives, that interaction, that relationship between waitstaff and customer is the only place where they find that hierarchy, the only place where they find that power. And granted that one little interaction, they will flex the muscle of supremacy. It's an instinct. It's at our base level. And it manifests itself at every level of the social and economic hierarchical ladder. Here's another story from the past week that I think reveals very well that we, at our base level, try to lord over one another. Ellen DeGeneres, one of the most successful talk show hosts of the last several decades, probably when it comes to daytime television, second only to Oprah, resigned this past week in the wake of a long-running scandal about how she reportedly treated her staff on the Ellen DeGeneres show. The allegations are from many producers and employees at the Ellen DeGeneres show was that she was awful, that she treated everyone terribly. Behind the scenes, on camera, Ellen came off as one of the nicest people in television. Generous, wonderful to be around. And to take this full circle back to the how long can you pretend, how authentic are you being on television, that had an expiration date. That had a timestamp. For Ellen, it took a while, many years, many tens of millions of dollars later. It turns out that the character she was playing on television wasn't the real person she was behind the scenes. I've heard tell of this, by the way. I've seen it play out. I know talent. I've heard rumors. I've heard of people that are divas, that treat the makeup artist one way and fellow quote-unquote talent another way, who talk to low-level producers one way and their bosses another way. I'll give you one example that is pretty universally accepted as someone, no matter which makeup room you walked into or which backway hallway you went down, you heard that Rosie O'Donnell was generally terrible to everyone that worked on that show. I filled in on The View from time to time, and I've been around television for long enough to learn who treats people well and who treats people poorly. Rosie O'Donnell, almost to a man, and this comes with no first-hand knowledge, but numerous second and third-hand accounts, treated people terribly. And while doing so, went on television every day and preached kindness and empathy. You see, at our base level, we're tribalistic. At our base level, we're looking to lord over one another, finding areas to acquire, commandeer power, looking for areas to be supreme over one another. And civilization, both at the individual and societal level, is setting those base level instincts aside. And I think we need to remember that as we go about tearing down foundations of society. Again, the United States of America is the peak of achievement of human civilization. So when we go around tearing down statues, canceling books, questioning our very foundational values, understand that society and civilization are very hard to build and easy to tear down. Should you succeed in tearing them down, base level instincts are not far under the surface. But here's why I'm talking about base level instincts and why I'm talking about Ellen DeGeneres and Rosie O'Donnell, or why I'm talking about how you treat the wait staff when it comes to COVID and masks. Because as Rosie O'Donnell, behind the scenes, treated people with cruelty and went on television and preached empathy and kindness, our base level instincts of supremacy or tribalism come packaged in Trojan horses, beautiful gift wrapping of kindness, empathy, and good manners. I give you an exchange I had this week on Fox and Friends with Geraldo Rivera. Listen to this, and I want you to pay attention to a clip that is a little bit longer than one I would normally play for you. It should be about 3 minutes long, but it's important because within the span of 3 minutes, I want you to watch how we migrate from good manners to show me your papers.
My 6-year-old near you without knowing for sure that you are vaccinated. Yeah. Can I let you in my restaurant if I don't know for sure that you're vaccinated? Should I sit next to you on the airplane if you don't have a mask on? There's still a lot of question marks. It's almost over. When people get impatient and they get reckless and they, smash up buildings and protest and so forth, I just think that in a couple of months, this is all going to be history.
I think you've just illustrated one of my greatest concerns about something you said earlier. And I totally understand what you said, Geraldo. You said, I wear a mask because I want to have good manners. I know there are many people out there who feel similarly to you. They're trying to, quote unquote, look out for their neighbor by wearing a mask or getting vaccinated. But what starts out as empathy so many times in our society, and not just on COVID-related issues, what starts out as good manners turns into bullying, turns into demands, turns into requirement. And within the span, Geraldo, of 2 minutes, you went from good manners to requiring me to show my papers. You went from trying to be a good neighbor to asking me to prove my vaccination, my voter registration, to prove everything on a card. And that's my concern. You start with empathy and you end with a demand.
All right, Will, what if this is the scenario? I'm seated at a restaurant with my wife and my children. You come in, you sit at the neighboring restaurant. Shouldn't I have a reasonable expectation that you are vaccinated, that your family, those members that are appropriate, are vaccinated?
No.
Don't you owe me, as a fellow citizen, the reassurance that you're not going to make my family sick?
No.
I think that if you disagree with me,
the science
then there's
suggests I do not
conflict to come.
But the science suggests I do not present a threat. You are vaccinated. You'll have the choice of whether or not to vaccinate your children. The risk is minimal. The numbers backed up by the data suggest your concerns, and I might suggest your paranoia, does not get to impede upon my freedom.
Do you see? The mask wasn't there for empathy. It wasn't there for good manners. It certainly wasn't there for science. It was there for something else. To boss other people around. And there will be a moving target. Rachel Maddow will find new ground from which to find herself better than you. She will find another way to feel superior. And I can guarantee you where that fight will be. It will be a battle on the ground of vaccination. First, it will start out over whether or not vaccines need to be mandatory. Probably regarding our children. And then it will move into the ground of vaccine passports. Show me your papers, as Geraldo very neatly laid out for you, proving to one another that we are vaccinated. Now listen to me, and I've said this before on previous podcasts, and I will die on this hill. I am not an anti-vaxxer. I have taken vaccines and given vaccines to my children and my loved ones throughout my entire life. I'm sitting here today telling you I got the COVID vaccine. I took J&J. But I'll be damned if you will either bribe me, as we talked about in the last podcast, or you will shame me, name call, hector me about getting a vaccine from my children and not, in the process, answer any of my questions or the cost-benefit analysis. Again, go listen to the Will Cain podcast last episode where we talked about the numbers of children who are infected or transmit COVID compared to the unknowns long-term of the COVID vaccine that is only approved for emergency use. Or listen to me talk about the fact that Vaccine companies, pharmaceutical companies have been granted total liability immunity, no downside. And since when it has been the tenet of the left, or really anyone in America, that for-profit corporations, one of the largest industries in this world, when granted the privilege of no downside, of not being able to be sued, ever acted in everyone's great interest. Never cut a corner, always did it above board. No, I will not be back down with cries of anti-vaxxer when it comes to my children. Maybe I'll have a come to Jesus. Maybe, by the way, my kids will get vaccinated. I'm not telling you there's a problem with the vaccine. I'm not telling you I'm not going to vaccinate my kids. What I'm telling you is I won't be shamed or hectored or bribed into injecting something in my child's arm. I will make that decision intimately with my wife, with my family, weighing the costs and benefits, weighing the risk reward, asking all of the questions. And maybe at the end of that process, I will decide that I want to have my children vaccinated. Maybe society will put me in a difficult position and I'll have this come to Jesus moment where I'll neither be able to allow them to go to school or play in youth sports or go to summer camp unless they have a vaccine. And maybe at that point I'll fold, but I will fight it every step of the way. And when I say fight it, I mean I will fight for the ability for all of us to make decisions based upon logic and rationality and personal choice, and not the tyranny of name-calling from a group that has proven their guiding principle is not science, their guiding principle is not fear, but their guiding principle has been laid out bare by people like David Hogg, by people like Rachel Maddow, that their guiding principle is simply to find another place from which they can project their virtue and supremacy over you. We will move from masks to vaccine mandates, and we will move from vaccine mandates to vaccine passports. And we will move there not because science requires it, not because fear requires it, and not even because paranoia requires it. We will move there because someone's identity, someone's need for moral supremacy requires they find a new issue to stand on a mountaintop over you. Just like racists are the ones who most often yell racist, just like anti-science morons are the ones most likely to wield science as a fashion item. Just like that, fascists have been the ones yelling fascist for 4+ years. We will go from mandates to vaccine passports, and maybe passports won't be obvious enough. Maybe we'll have to go to armbands that show who is and who is not vaccinated. How else can you be sure which one of us is anti-science? How else can we be sure whether or not I am better than you? How else can we be sure that Rachel Maddow has the moral high ground? And honestly, that takes me back to God. Look, I don't want to be a partisan. I want to be a truth teller. And the truth is, as you know, my political leanings are conservative. The left does not have a monopoly on this search for moral supremacy. Conservatives are just as guilty on occasion. I grew up going to church every Sunday, going to youth group every Sunday night. You and I both know, if you are a Christian, that we can end up judging each other. We can judge each other based upon our fidelity to our faith. We can judge each other sometimes based upon whether or not you go to the Baptist or the Methodist church, and maybe even more absurdly, which pew do you sit in on Sundays? We all find ways to rank each other, to find our hierarchy. We find ways to search for moral superiority. But while every human being, regardless of political ideology or party, is guilty of this base level instinct, it is the left that has internalized it as part of their ideology. For too many on the left, their virtue has been found by finding themselves superior to you. For too many on the left, their virtue has been found at the ballot box. My religious journey is one from church every Sunday to a wayward soul. And I'll probably talk about this in my pursuit to be real with you over the coming months here on the Will Cain podcast. But as I get older and I get more in touch with my humility, I also finding myself more in touch with God, to reconnecting to my Christianity. I would suggest to you that all of us need to find our virtue, find our civilization, find our grounding, not at the ballot box, not in comparisons between one another, but in being a good citizen, community member, by being a good person, by living up to ideals and finding our moral high ground in a place that exists far beyond you and me, in a place that is and can be only inhabited by God. Story number 3 takes us to the college campus. 2 different college campuses. Let's travel together, if you will. First, to St. John's University, where a professor there has been fired for quoting Mark Twain. Professor Hannah Fishtal of St. John's University was teaching a course wherein she asked the students to read Pudd'nhead Wilson by Mark Twain. Now, Pudd'nhead Wilson was published in 1894. It's not one of Twain's best-known novels, and it is about, according to the New York Post, the absurdity and tragedy of racism and slavery. Let me read to you what the Post says the plot of Pudd'nhead Wilson is about. The plot turns on a light-skinned slave named Roxy, who decides to switch her light-skinned baby boy with her master's baby boy shortly after birth in order to save her child from being sold down the river and to ensure him a life of wealth and white privilege. But Roxy's biological son grows up to be a spoiled monster, while the master's biological son grows up as a humble man of character. In this book, which highlights the absurdity of racism and slavery, Twain speaks in a dialect that would have been used in pre-Civil War Southern United States. And in that authenticity, he uses the N-word. Now, Professor Fishtal, in reading this book aloud on a Zoom class, of course, to the class, warned everyone in the class, I am going to read this verbatim. I hope no one is offended. And then she went on to read this book as part of their curriculum and read aloud the N-word. A day after the class, the professor got an email from a student who said she had to abruptly leave the class. I guess that means click out of the Zoom meeting, because of that inappropriate slur. The professor apologized, of course, and opened up a forum for everyone to give their feedback. Apparently 6 different students all emailed in, 2 to support the professor, 4 also upset, and immediately that professor was put on suspension and investigated. As you know, the story ends. Professor Fishtal has been fired from St. John's for reading aloud from Mark Twain. Hop in your imaginary car. Let's take an audio trip then just up the road to Pennsylvania, to Penn State University. And I need to read you this report from the New York Post word for word. It's good. Trust me. Pigskin powerhouse Penn State has jumped on the woke wagon. The sprawling public university will replace pronouns such as he, him, hers with they, them, theirs, replace traditional student designations such as freshman and sophomore with, quote, first year and second year, and replace underclassmen and upperclassmen with, quote, lower division and upper division, according to Penn State News. I go on. The preferred name and gender identity policy was passed by Penn State's Senate Committee on Curriculum Affairs on April 27th. And now we're quoting from this body. Terms such as freshman are decidedly male-specific, while terms such as upperclassmen can be interpreted as both sexist and classist. Ooh, double whammy there. Misogynistic and not sufficiently Marxist. I go on, quoting now. Terms such as junior and senior are parallel to Western male father-son naming conventions, and much of our written documentation is he-she pronouns. This is not from The Onion, or better yet, the Babylon Bee. This is not satire. This is not Saturday Night Live. This is real. And then the Post goes on to quote someone from Twitter, because that's always a fun source, asking, hey, how long until the Nittany Lion, which is, of course, a male term, is replaced by the gender-neutral correct subspecies eastern cougar? Of course, then we probably need to address the fact that cougars are also gender-specific. I'm not aware of any male 40-year-old prowlers out there hitting the bar scene calling themselves cougars. So that's probably also sexist and demeaning. So we're going to have to revisit Eastern Cougar as well. We're probably just going to have to start referring to each other and speaking in general grunts and moans. Maybe not moans. Again, that might over-sexualize us. So let's just talk like cavemen. Can we all just be good like cavemen again? How did this happen? How did we slide into insanity? And it is insanity. I found this fascinating poll, and it is from the UK. It's called JL Partners, who interviewed 2,000 people in Great Britain. It was published in a newspaper over there. And I want to share it with you because I think it actually probably mirrors stuff going on over here. But it's fascinating. So here's the deal. The question asked is, who backs these woke ideas? And it does two separate polls. First, it polls Labor and conservative parties, which loosely mirror our Democrat and Republican parties, not issue for issue, but loosely Labor is Democrat and conservative is Republican. Truthfully, there's no defenders of Western freedom, no political party that truly believes in individual freedom in Great Britain. But for the moment, we will go ahead and use these as proxies for American political parties. Labor basically down the line, most of the time at over 50% margins, agrees with woke ideas like the following. Statues of historical figures need to be taken down. Men being allowed to redefine themselves as women and access women-only facilities. Breastfeeding being named chest feeding. Yep. Children being allowed to use puberty blockers and hormone therapy to change their gender. These are the ideas, again, that we are polling. The idea that Britain is a systemically or institutionally racist country. Didn't you think that was just an American issue? Oh, no. I go on. People facing losing their jobs for liking politically incorrect posts, so cancel culture, both there and here. And as you go down and you look at all of these different issues, labor, 56, 43, 31, 36, 52, 41% accepted. Conservative, 10, 9, 12, 8, 10, 24, 14. So what you're looking at here is, of course, these woke ideas more embraced by their Labor Party than their conservative, as they are more accepted by Democrats than Republicans here. But I don't care. Forget that, okay? Here's what's important. Go down those same issues. Tear down statues, chest feeding, men redefining themselves to go into women bathrooms or play women's sports, children taking puberty blockers, systemically racist as the definition of your society. As you put this to the public now, forget political parties, who supports and who opposes? No one supports these ideas. 18% support taking down statues, 19% on gender re-identification, 5% on this whole chest feeding thing, which, to be honest with you, I never even heard about before this poll. Children using puberty blockers, 13% support. Nobody supports this insanity. Obviously, then the question is, why is it overtaking our society? And make no mistake, it is overtaking our society. People are getting canceled every day. We don't cover it every day anymore. Bombs are literally going off in the Middle East, but it's still happening. It just happened last week at Apple, where a guy was fired for a book that he wrote some 10 years ago, and he was only hired at Apple in the last couple of years. So they knew what he had said, and by the way, it wasn't offensive, but they fired him for it because a radical, microscopic minority of employees at Apple demanded it. What's going on? Why are corporate CEOs walking around doing something they know deep down to be inherently wrong? You don't think CEOs are truthfully in this 13%, 9% support for these crazy ideas, do you? No, so why are they doing it? Yes, of course, they're weak. And yes, of course, they're going along to get along. And yes, fear is driving everything. But why are we allowing it to do so? Here, listen to this sound really quickly. Now, this is Bill de Blasio. This is a safe member of the far left. The mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, is announcing that he's going to bribe you to get the coronavirus vaccine. He's going to give you burger and fries from Shake Shack. Better yet, I think the price isn't quite that high. He's just going to give you fries. But in the process of announcing this at a press conference in New York, he's eating a burger and fries. I want you to listen to the wind-up, though. I want you to listen to the runway he lays down before he literally takes a bite of a burger on camera. Listen to his fear of offending some absurdly small microscopic minority.
Wait a minute. But there's also a burger element to this? Let me check with Bill Neathart. Is it too early in the day to eat a burger? No. This could be breakfast? Okay. I want you to look at this and think about, again, some people love hamburgers, some don't. Really want to respect all ways of life. But if this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination.
Now, who out there truly finds themselves so offended they cannot watch this, they might have to leave the room, that he's eaten a burger? What vegan takes themselves that seriously? What PETA-driven, anti-meat moron really needs to be caveated in that press conference? That's a man, no matter how far on the left, no matter how safely ensconced in radical ideology, is walking around on eggshells because he knows he could be canceled given the slightest offense. Here's what I think is going on, at least in part. Man, we've turned online into real life. We have allowed social media to influence every aspect of behavior. I have seen, listen to me, I have seen major media corporations bend to the will of a single tweet account. One tweet account can change a policy. I have seen people bend to, again, I use these words precisely, microscopic minorities. And you know, and this is me having to caveat my language because someone could twist or turn or intentionally misinterpret what I'm talking about. When I say the word minority, of course I'm not talking about the euphemism we've turned the word minority into. I'm not talking about African Americans or Asian Americans or any other minority. I'm talking about a minority point of view. I'm talking about something that if you polled 100 people, 2 at best would hold. I'm talking about a point of view that is so small that any democratic society, or for that matter, capitalist institution whose business you would think would be predicated upon getting as many customers as possible, would not cater to. We have turned online into real life. Here's, I think, an example that illustrates what I'm talking about on multiple levels. Elon Musk hosted Saturday Night Live a week ago. By the way, it rated really well, despite the fact that some SNL cast members found Elon Musk to be offensive. But anyway, Elon Musk appears in a skit here where, I don't know, he's supposed to be a doctor and he's speaking in online, hip, cool Gen Z lingo, and it's called Gen Z Hospital. And listen to the way that all the characters in the skit talk to each other.
Just give us the tea.
Okay, well, as you may have seen on her live, your bestie took a major L while driving her Hellcat.
Yeah, we saw.
We tried everything we could in surgery, and it was sus for a while. But we have your bestie on a machine, and we're doing everything we can.
So, Bestie's gonna be okay, right?
I'm sorry, but at this particular time, that's looking like cap.
Bro, can we see her?
Unfortunately, not right now, bro. You know the vibes. But I promise, if anything changes, I'll pull up.
Say less, bro.
And thank you, doctor. You a real one.
We stand you.
Now, okay, I saw that, by the way, and here's what I thought. I thought, they're talking like they're on Twitter. Lit, yo, all those different lingos you hear that people use on Instagram and Twitter and all these different places. Well, guess what? I know you're not going to be surprised. People were offended. Why were they offended? Well, apparently because this lingo is, in their estimation, AAVE. Do you know that acronym? There's so many to keep up with today. African American Vernacular English. So what that skit was accused of was cultural appropriation of AAVE. Again, what I heard in that skit was people talking like they were typing on social media. But here's the kicker. That skit was written by Michael Che. He also was surprised. Michael Che, African-American, cast member of SNL. He had never heard of AAVE. And he didn't know that he was offending some microscopic minority. Now, of course, Saturday Night Live apologized for offending who knows how many people, 4, that were truly offended by that skit. And who cares if it's an AAVE-based offense or it's just everyone beginning to talk like and now act like and, of course, cater to and set their policy based upon a microscopic minority that exists online. Here's what's happening. We are letting online become real life. And maybe, trust me, an on-the-fly effort to tie a ribbon on this podcast and bring all these 3 stories together, maybe, just maybe, we can all work on being real. Maybe I'll be real this week on the 7 p.m. primetime show. Maybe we can be real with each other. Maybe we can treat each other in real life the same way we would online or on TV. Maybe we can set aside our base instincts and not be tribalistic. Judge each other, treat each other as individuals, not rank ourselves and put ourselves into hierarchies and search for our moral supremacy, but be real here in the real world with one another. I hope you'll be with me this week. Again, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Fox News Primetime. There'll be a new Will Cain podcast coming out on Friday. Let's do this. Let's review myself. Not in an act of vanity. I know how that sounded. I'm talking about you can give me feedback at Will Cain on Twitter, see Will Cain on Instagram, Will Cain on Facebook. And you know what? I'm not above criticism. I'm not above judgment. I'm not above your feedback. Let's be real. Download, subscribe, rate, review, share with your friends. This has been the Will Cain Podcast on Fox News Podcast.
Listen to be part of the conversation with me, Brian Kilmeade. I'll talk about the biggest stories of the day and get your take along with some of the biggest newsmakers around. Listen live on the Fox News app or get the podcast at briankilmeadshow.com.